Ready? Okay. Well, thanks again for joining us. I see some new faces and some folks I've seen a few days earlier this week. Part of what we've been doing this week is trying to introduce folks within the UTA community to individuals that we think are doing fascinating and interesting work that has relevance to the future vision of what UTA aspires to become as a system, as well as provide an opportunity for researchers, academics, and others to be able to connect with individuals that are doing work that has particular relevance within their own domain as well. So really pleased today to introduce Daniella Gasevic, who is someone who is doing an area of work that, especially as the research or the revision process we've gone through as a university lately, trying to articulate what are key research focal points for the university, ideas of the mega cities, bigger cities, the health care of individuals in that city start to become quite critical or paramount to where we progress or move forward to, both in terms of research, but also very practically in terms of society. And so I think Daniella's work on the built environment, health, and related factors is particularly relevant, not just to us as a research community, but I think to each of us as individuals. So without much more, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, George, for the introduction. And it is nice to see familiar faces here. And thank you for showing interest in this talk and for joining me for it today. During this talk, I'll briefly first introduce a little bit of brief overview of physical activity and the built environment and the relationship between the two. And that will give some examples on how we can increase physical activity levels in the existing environments. So this week, we had a great opportunity to hear some fascinating talks on learning technologies and learning analytics. And with this talk on the built environment and health, we are slightly shifting gears, but really not much, because it has been shown that greater engagement in physical activity is associated with greater academic performance. So now that you're in Texas, now that I'm in Texas and we're in Texas, let me show you the results of one really, really great, big study. It's called the Texas Youth Fitness Study. And in that study, more than 2 million children, actually school children, in grades 3 to 12, that come from about 6,500 schools, which is about 75% of all schools in Texas. All of these kids were assessed for level of fitness, and they were assessed for academic performance, school attendance, and for disciplinary incidents such as consumption of alcohol, and violence. So what was found in the study, and really amazing data because it's all more than 2 million children assessed, 2 million school children assessed, what was found was that the greater physical fitness was associated with better academic performance, with better school attendance, and with fewer disciplinary incidents. This is a cross-sectional study, so it is hard to say whether this relationship is going to persist over time or is going to change. So let me show you another study, really neat one, that comes from West Virginia, that assessed more than 1,700 school children. And it's a longitudinal study. What they did, they followed kids from their grade 5 to grade 7, and they grouped kids by the level of fitness. So still, they looked in the association between physical fitness and academic performance. So they grouped children in 4 groups based on their level of fitness and based on whether their level of fitness persisted over time or changed over time. So the first group were students who were fit in grade 5 and continued being fit in grade 7. The last group was a group of students who were unfit in grade 5 and then continued being unfit in grade 7. And in between 2 groups, they were the ones where physical fitness increased over time or decreased over time. So what did they find? What did they find? So they found that they observed that a greater academic performance was in a group of students who were fit in grade 5 and continued being fit over time to grade 7. And then a little poorer academic performance noted among the students who were unfit in grade 5 and their level of fitness increased over time. Then even poorer academic performance was among students whose fitness level decreased over time. So they were fit, and all of a sudden in grade 7 they were unfit. And then the poorest academic performance was observed among kids who were unfit in grade 5 and continue being unfit in grade 7. There are many other studies that are looking at physical activity and academic performance, and there are many reviews that were made. And some of those, like one of those that was published is by Center for Disease Control and Prevention, where you can see that, I'll just quote them, that physical activity can have an impact on cognitive skills and attitudes and academic behavior, all of which are important components of improved academic performance. These include enhanced concentration and attention, as well as improved classroom behavior. did establish some association between physical activity and academic performance. However, it is important to note that the way physical activity affects us, our bodies and our health, is much, much broader. And let me show you some examples. So, physical activity can help us regulate our weight. Of course, there's like a balance. We need energy intake and energy output, but that physical activity is part of that balance. So it will help us regulate our weight. Also, it can help us reduce the risk for cardiovascular disease. So higher engagement in physical activity can help us control blood pressure. Also, it can increase good cholesterol portion, regulate our blood lipids and blood cholesterol levels by increasing good cholesterol and decreasing bad cholesterol. It can also reduce the risk for type 2 diabetes by regulating blood sugar levels. Also, it can strengthen our bones and our muscles, and especially in elderly, it is important because with greater physical activity, there's greater prevention of falls. Also, it can improve our mood. It can make us happier, improve our mental health, and definitely increases chances of living longer. But how much of that physical activity do we need to reap the benefits? So both Canadian and U.S. guidelines agree that we should avoid inactivity. So we should avoid sedentariness. So practically we have two health messages. The one is to increase physical activity, and the other one is to avoid sedentariness, so to decrease sedentariness. And what do the guidelines say? Like pretty much they're in line, and they say that we need about 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity. And moderate physical activity being like if you feel that your heart rate increases, breathing rate increases, you're kind of sweating a little bit, such as like when you're brisk walking or riding a bike. Or vigorous activity when you're kind of sweating more profusely and you're feeling that you're out of breath, like it happens when you're jogging. And right now, we always, like when we do the counseling in a community or in a patient's office, we would talk to people and say like, okay, it is important to increase physical activity. We explain how things are and why that is important, pretty much show them the chart and everything. But you know, it is not similar as when you prescribe a medication. Because when you prescribe a medication, they go home with that prescription, they go to the pharmacy, and they have that physical proof of bottle with medications that they kind of put on the table, and they are reminded on a daily basis they should take it. With physical activity is a little bit different. So we talk to people, but then like in a week or two, they kind of forget what we were talking about. So if physical activity would be a powerful medication, I bet everyone would take it. So why don't we just prescribe it? And it was endorsed recently. This was just a few days ago, actually. The news from a few days ago, where doctors of BC and British Columbia and New Brunswick Medical Society in Canada, they just decided to hand out prescription pads to physicians. And what would physicians do? Like after the talk with a patient, they would just say, okay, Mr. Such and Such, Mrs. Such and Such, until our next visit, we can just, I prescribe you physical activity 30 minutes per day for 6 days a week at least, and you should do that until we meet next time. So that is really neat. It gives them some physical proof. They can stick on a fridge. They can make and work around how actually to do that. But when we talk to people, when we talk to people and say like it is important to increase physical activity, the first thing that pops up in their mind is like profuse sweating on a treadmill, running until you're kind of out of breath, and that's what they think about physical activity. Physical activity equal exercise. But there are actually differences. There is a slight difference between there's a difference between physical activity and exercise, because physical activity is any bodily movement that results in energy expenditure, while exercise is actually a form of physical activity that is planned and structured to increase our strength or flexibility or aerobic endurance. So we tell a person, okay, you should be on that treadmill for 35 minutes, 6 days or 3 days a week, and with a certain such and such heart rate. So we have a planned and structured activity. So pretty much every exercise is physical activity, but not every physical activity is exercise. So it is an important distinction. And we have various types of physical activity. For example, we have leisure type physical activity, and if you check out to your left, This is my buddy Liam. So this is his leisure physical activity in his leisure time, crawling. But it can be now he learned to walk, so it can be walking, or it can be cycling in leisure time. So any discretionary activity that you're doing at your leisure time. Or it could be a domestic-related physical activity where we can do like housework, like sweeping, cleaning, or some gardening to include the whole family, for example. Or we could have a work-related physical activity. It could be the one like this on the photo, or some that are, for example, people who work parking meters officers. They walk pretty much all day and just collect money from park meter to park meter. So there are different ways. Or if you're a yoga instructor, that maybe that's how you will be engaged physical activity that is work-related. Also, we have transportation-related physical activity, where we go from point A to point B to do some either errands or go to work, go to school. So it could be walking to school or walking to work, cycling to work. Sometimes those differences are not as clear, like distinctions are not as clear. And people can actually do domestic, like for example, gardening during their leisure time. So they kind of overlap. And sometimes really, you don't know when it starts and when it stops, because like we start as a leisure physical activity. If your partner is like mine, it will start as a leisure physical activity, but switches really quickly to work-related physical activity and goes back and forth, depending on the number of reminders they give him. So let's see how inactive are we. So what are the population statistics? So on the upper one, we can see that about 31% of population, about a third of population, is not active enough. So 30%, it doesn't seem as much. But if you translate that into numbers, into other numbers, it will be about 2.5 billion people is not active enough. And if you live in higher income countries, the rates of inactivity are even higher than in lower income countries. But lower income countries are kind of catching up rapidly because of westernization, urbanization, and all the changes that are undergoing in their own countries. In both in the US and in Canada, we can see that about half population is not active enough. And is it really only about us? So we always see like, oh, I can hear often people are lazy, they're couch potatoes, they don't want to stand up, they don't want to walk. It's about the person. But is it really just about us? Is it only us to blame? Because I can just give you one example. So I arrived to Arlington, and of course, first thing you do, you just go shopping for groceries. And I was like, okay, let me just see. And I'm used to walking to grocery stores in Vancouver. It's a very walkable city. So the first thought was, okay, I'm just going to walk to a grocery store, pick up groceries. It'll be like 10 or 20 pounds of it, and I'm just going to walk back. So I quickly went online, checked. First one is 5 miles away. So I was thinking, oh, 5 miles. It's like it'll be a nice leisure walk, but I just imagine myself carrying like 20 pounds of groceries. It didn't look like fun. So I was like, instead of walking, let me just take the transit. So I would take a bus and then like walk from the bus stop to then to pick up groceries and do that. So I went online, but there was no transportation. So in the end of the day, it is not that I didn't want to. It is just the environmental constraints are that way that wouldn't let me to actually walk to a grocery store. And on this very neat model that was made by that was proposed by Professor James Salas from University of California, San Diego, and his colleagues. What I showed here is that there are multiple levels of influences on physical activity. So it can be, as we mentioned, like it can be intrapersonal. I had many parents who would say, like, I would like to exercise, I would like to be more active, but until I'm home, like I'm driving a lot, and until I'm home, and then kids and cooking and stuff, I'm really tired, I can't do it anymore. Or what if you live in the neighborhoods that you don't feel as safe to walk around the neighborhood? So that will prevent you from walking too. Or what if your cities are constructed that way and your neighborhoods are constructed that way that actually there are no sidewalks along you can walk? Because I would often tell people, I was like, okay, maybe it'll be great to take a public transport and get off 2 or 3 stops earlier and then walk to work. But sometimes there's no public transportation, and sometimes we have no sidewalks, and sometimes the distances are so huge that actually prevent us from walking. What about the weather? while in Canada, in many provinces, about 6 months there's snow, and if you're not enjoying ski sports, snow sports, then it's definitely not for you. Or if there's a big air pollution. Or what about the impact of media and social interactions? If our friends are more sedentary, there's probably greater chance that we will engage in more of sedentary activity too. So there are multiple influences. There are multiple influences on physical activity. And I mentioned that in that framework, the way the cities are built can encourage or discourage our health-related behaviors, one of which is physical activity. So the way the cities are built environment, which is the way the cities are built and arranged by humans. And it is human-made or modified characteristics of the physical environment. It can be our schools, the places we live in, sidewalks and parks and playgrounds. And I prepared just prepared here. It's more like a glossary because the built environment encompasses 3 parts, which is land use patterns, which is presence and density of certain activities, such as let it be commercial, residential, or institutional, industrial. Then the transportation systems, it's an infrastructure of roads that connect all those activities. And we have the design features, urban design features that are actually on a micro scale level, immediate features of our neighborhoods. So whether we had sidewalks present, how well they're maintained, is there lighting features, or what is the aesthetics. Then we have land use mix, and it can be vertical or horizontal. If you just imagine a building, on a vertical land use mix will be if we have, like on the first floor, we have a grocery store, and on the second floor and up, we have people living. Then how accessible certain features are, and then how these features are connected. If you just imagine 2 spots, like if you want to go from A to B, and they look really close, but if those 2 spots are not connected, then you have to drive or walk like 35 minutes, even if you think you can do it in 5. It means we need to work more on connectivity for sure. And walkability, degree to which a single route or more routes between point and A and B and others, it's relatively short, barrier-free, interesting, how safe it is, how engaging and how inviting it is. So how do we measure the built environment? One way to measure it is we go to the built environment with a checklist, either paper-based or it can be like computer-based, and we walk down the segments, which is usually distance between 2 intersections of a block, and we say, okay, trees present, sidewalks well maintained, check. We say grocery store present and other features. So you can collect the data on which built environment features are present or not present on a certain segment. Another way we can assess the built environment is by asking people, like through the lens of a participant or a person. We ask people what they think about their environment. When they think about their environment, how long does it take for them to access the grocery store or to go to the bank, or do they have sidewalks in their environment? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Do they feel safe from crime or safe from traffic in their neighborhood, or do they think their neighborhood is really good to raise kids or for them to live in? And the last one would be if we rely on existing data, so secondary sources, which could be either from censuses or geographic information systems or various street network maps, so all the data that's already available in secondary. So here are some features of the built environment shown to be associated with physical activity. So for example, individuals who live in neighborhoods that have high residential density, where streets are well connected, and with high mix of commercial, residential, industrial, institutional uses, they're more likely to engage in physical activity. And these 3 usually compose a walkability index that will tell us, like, the higher the walkability, the greater engagement in physical activity. Also, living in neighborhoods where we have higher access to parks and open spaces, greater access to gyms, or if we have sidewalks and well-maintained sidewalks on the street, and if streets are well lit, then it's a greater engagement in physical activity too. Also, if there is a greater, lower crime rate and people feel safer from crime and traffic, and if it's aesthetically pleasing environment, that will certainly raise people's people's activity levels. Let me show you the study that was done in our lab, where we explored the association between microenvironment, microbuilt environment, and various types of physical activity. And we looked at total physical activity, overall walking, transport, and leisure physical activity. This study is a sub-study of a much larger longitudinal study called the Prospective Urban-Rural Epidemiology Study. That is the longitudinal study that tracks lifestyle changes, risk factors, and chronic disease prevalence in urban and rural areas of more than 20 countries. So it's a fascinating study set by Professor Salim Yusuf and Kun Teo. But for this sub-study, we were using just participants. We recruited participants only who are coming from a higher income neighborhood, this is Vancouver area, which is closer to the water and closer to downtown, and lower income area that is closer to Fraser River and more like industrial area. So all our participants were assessed for sociodemographics. They reported physical activity levels using International Physical Activity Questionnaire. We asked them all the ones I explained earlier, perceived environmental measures, so we asked them what they think about their neighborhood, and we also assessed the neighborhood objectively. So this was that type direct, and let me just show you how I did that. So for this, in this study, we defined neighborhood as a 500-meter buffer around the participant. So this dot being a participant and 500-meter buffer. So within each neighborhood, all of these blocks and all of these segments were assessed, and let me show you how I did that. So this is one of my working maps. So practically, I would go and assess each segment, and for each block, I would have a checklist where I collected about 122 data points. And given that it was about 1,700 blocks, that was more than 270,000 data points. So it was very, very rich data, even if it's just two neighborhoods. So what I was looking at, so while looking, I was looking like what types of housing is there? Is it like present a higher residential one, or is it lower, like separate houses? Then I was looking whether the vertical mixed use. So these are some of the examples. So on the lower, you have like a grocery store or boutique or something, and on the upper, you have like residential. Then accessibility. Like I was looking whether there's access to bus stops or malls or grocery stores, whether there's access to crosswalks, what about the access to universities, hospitals, coffee shops and restaurants, so access to many amenities and many features. Also, I was looking at the aesthetics, or like for example, see this, do you think whether this is aesthetically pleasing, or would you like to live in such neighborhoods with a lot of litter, with some wiring on top, there's like sidewalk present but not very well maintained, or no sidewalk at all, like in this industrial area, or you would rather live in somewhere like this, where it's like a lot of parks and gardens and presence of trees, it's more aesthetically pleasing and nicely maintained sidewalks. Also, I was looking at presence of graffiti and litter, and this is a block watch signs where people in the neighborhood, they design to kind of be a little police officers, and whatever happens in the neighborhood, they can quickly just report to the police. So they're their own protectors, neighborhood protectors. And safety from traffic. I was looking how many lanes are on the street, whether there are crosswalks, is it safe to cross, whether there are any traffic calming devices. So before I go into the results, I will just briefly show you, introduce you to the study population. Individuals coming from higher income setting were on average older. They had a higher level of formal education. They also had a greater household income. But in low income setting, it was more ethnically diverse. And I mentioned earlier that we asked people about how they perceive their neighborhood. And this is just a slide to show that not everyone perceives built environment the same. There are differences here you can see between gender-based, there are differences household income-based, people differ in their perception depending on the neighborhood they live in, whether it's high or low income neighborhood. And also there are differences, ethnic-based differences. So for example, individuals who were of non-European origin, they were more likely to express safety from crime and traffic. concerns about safety from crime and traffic in their neighborhoods, not to report their neighborhoods as aesthetically pleasing. They were not to report presence of sidewalks, and less likely to report access to transit and shopping. So not everyone perceives the environment the same. So let me just give you some the results of the association between built environment and physical and different modes of physical activity. So we tested about over 60 perceived built environment features, but as you can see here, there are only limited number of variables that kind of stood out in their association with physical activity. And the interesting was that people who reported having heavy traffic in their neighborhoods, they were less likely to engage in total physical transportation and walking. And people who reported greater access to entertainment were more likely to engage in more leisure physical activity. So compared to the previous slide, where the number of features was very limited, on this slide we can see that there's more different features that are associated with different types of activity. But interestingly, none of the objective environment features were associated with total physical activity. And for the rest of one, living in places that have greater safety from traffic, like places marked for safe crossing, having sidewalks, then greater access to amenities such as services and restaurants, they were associated with greater transportation and walking physical activity. Also, higher residential density associated with transportation compared to lower residential density that is associated with leisure. So we can see that there is a difference even in features that are associated with different types of physical activity. So earlier I mentioned a little bit about walkability and how greater walkability is associated with greater physical activity. So how walkable is your city? If you think that, and if you just kind of pay attention to these two photos, these are two cities I've recently visited. It doesn't really matter which the cities are, but let's just focus on the differences between the two. Both photos I took from observational towers that are downtown, positioned downtown in both of the cities. So what we can see on the city in the city to the right, we can just, and compare it to the city to the left, we can see like higher residential density on this kind of square. We can see that roads are a little bit smaller, and they're kind of better connected. And if you trust my word, pretty much in every of these buildings there are like coffee shops and nice stores like on the first floor. And I could have easily accessed, and I did that, like easily accessed any part of this city because there were sidewalks and it was easy to cross. But on the left-hand side, when I was watching from the observational tower, I was kind of trying to figure out how do I walk to cross there and just kind of hang around to see what's there. So I was kind of walking around, trying to figure it out, but I just realized that it's not as safe and decided not to do it. So we did it by car. It's a lower residential density, like a little bit bigger of a stroll. Not as many sidewalks like that you can kind of walk. So if you compare these two cities, then you can see maybe that this one is more walkable than the other one. And can we put that in numbers? In research, we can calculate walkability index, but there is a very neat tool that can help us just put numbers to, like, give us a walkability index, like really, really quickly. We don't have to be researchers. You can pretty much go to the walkscore.com and plug in the name of your city or your address, and it'll give you the walkability score. So I was really curious and did that for Vancouver. I knew that Vancouver is walkable. So the greener the better, because the higher the score. This is where we live. This is where I live, somewhere downtown, so it's really walkable. But then and the majority of things you can do by accomplish on foot. But as you can see, the more you go towards suburbia, it's getting redder and redder. So it means that walkability is going down. And then I plugged in the Arlington, and I say, okay, let's see what should I expect? Like, can I walk around? And it says the Arlington is a car-dependent city, and that more errands require a car. To my horror, I don't drive, so can you just imagine? So it is hard to adjust. So either I learn to drive or just choose another city. But we just thought, how do we use this walk score? Can we use it for research purposes? And we decided to, as part of the multicultural community health assessment trial, where we recruited people of European, of Aboriginal, Chinese, and South Asian descent, and can we test using walk score, the walkability, and its association with transportation and leisure physical activity. And you can see our participants are some are like in a greater Vancouver regional district, but some are kind of far away. So what we did, we plugged the address, like we wrote the address for each of those and found their scores and grouped participants in 4 groups. So in the first group consists of participants who live in neighborhoods that are pretty much car dependent. So it goes, the scores going 0 from 39, and the overall walk scores can go from 0 to 100. Higher score, the better walkability. And the highest quartile, it tells us like people who live in neighborhoods that are really highly walkable. So what we found was there was no association between walkability score, walk score, and leisure physical activity. But what we found for transportation physical activity was people who lived in highly walkable areas compared to the ones who lived in car-dependent areas, odds of engaging in transportation physical activity were 2 times higher. And the same for assessment. We did the assessment 3 years later. But it is always the thing that when I talk to majority of people, they actually, so many people live in this group, like even in Vancouver, when I talk to them, they live in car-dependent area. And even if there are kind of small neighborhoods are walkable, they still have to reach longer distances and they end up driving a lot. So sitting in a car, spending a lot of time in a hot car, sitting at work, sitting then at home. So there's a lot of sitting involved. So if you think about the time, how much time do you sit per day? And think about, compare it with how much time are you active per day. Compare the two. How many hours do you spend sitting and how many hours are you active? Do you feel that you're addicted to sitting? And it is really, sitting may be our next smoking, and we will definitely need to fight it. And we say, okay, if we live in such car-dependent cities, what else can we do if we spend a lot of time in cars? And we say, okay, maybe we can do something while we are at work. Because people say, when I come home, I can't walk anymore, I'm done. But we have to do shopping, like we usually have to do shopping, grocery shopping in the malls and stuff, and we have to go to work. And the first thing that pops up is like, oh, maybe we should take stairs. And can we make taking stairs like as fun activity? And maybe you heard or not about the piano stairs. You can go to the Fun Theory and actually look at the whole video. But what was done in Stockholm, they just changed the stairs and made them piano stairs. So pretty much if you step on the stairs, you make music. And all of a sudden it's fun, and in a few days they realized that increased stair use for more than 60%. But I would argue, and a majority of my colleagues, that there is even a better approach that would increase stair use for 90%, and that one is that we just switch off the escalators. And that usually happens when you have maintenance, like maintenance of escalators, and everyone has to take the stairs, so there's no other way. And then we can have elevators, or we can alternate. Let's do every other day and switch off the escalator. And then we leave elevators only for people like with parents with stroller, people who are using walkers or wheelchairs or carry heavy baggage. While we are at the stairs, let me show you these 2 photos. To your right is a fantastic staircase that I saw at School of Architecture at University of Texas Arlington. Really amazing. It's in the middle of the building, goes straight into your face. You can't miss it. It's bright. It's great for social interactions. It is in the middle of the building, so it's easy to walk to any of the offices and amphitheaters. Really, really nice. And one of the colleagues mentioned that he wishes if his staircase was even wider, because if people can hang around, like talk, and it'll be nice. But on the left-hand side, this is a typical staircase that we have, like regardless of the city, regardless of the country. This is mostly how it looks like. With dim light, when you enter, you can feel your pupils kind of dilate to adjust for that level of darkness. And when you go and you try to find it, you can't even find it, because like you see the signs for the elevator, you see the signs for washrooms, you see signs for everything but not for stairs. And they're like just next to the door of stairs, and sometimes even doors are invisible. So what if we actually switched, moved things around, and we had a dim light in elevators, and like make it as dark as possible, and had like beautiful bright light on the staircase. And what if we change the colors of the staircase and change the color of the door to make it red or purple? It doesn't really matter, just to stand out and show some motivational messages like step by step to your health, or something similar, something nice that would motivate people to take it, and have like big, huge signs, like tiny signs to the elevator and huge signs to the staircase. What if we changed it and make it like themes related? And for example, staircase to research link lab to the second floor, or other labs that are there, maybe they can make it that we know what's happening in that lab. What on that floor? What if we put bulletin boards and very important information on it that people have to take it? Or what if we decided to put some music on, like make it even nicer for students to hang around and like be there? Or put some student artwork. I saw something similar in the School of Architecture. It's amazing. It looks beautiful. So something like that we can certainly do, and that would increase and kind of people would be more prompt to take the stairs. We spend a lot of time sitting at work, and sometimes we always say like, oh, maybe you should stand up, but sometimes we are all ingrained in our work, and it can be hours and hours without blinking. There's some great way, instead of sitting all the time, we can stand up, and if we have money to buy standing desks, that's even better. So to our left, it's Dr. Mark Daniel from University of South Australia. Yes, he's a health researcher. Their lab is doing fascinating work on spatial epidemiology, so if you're interested in this field, you just please check them out. But he's having a fantastic desk, like cyber, as they call it, cyber desk. It's really great. You can adjust the level and stuff. But usually people tell me, oh yes, only you health researchers, you're buying such desks, and that's only important to you, and you have more money and stuff like that. But it's really not the truth. Like to the right is one of your very own, Dr. Douglas Clark from the School of Architecture here, University of Texas Arlington. He has a fancy desk attached to the treadmill, so he can adjust the speed and he can walk like slowly, that it does not interrupt his work. And I also heard that in the School of Education there is such treadmill, and maybe there are many more in this very building. And some standing desks are available in the library too here. But if this is too expensive, let's improvise. This is Dr. Tim Rogers from Teaching and Learning Unit, so from University of South Australia. He had you see, he made a special desk for himself by trying to put to stuck things one on each other, which still looks neat, but still it takes some money, much cheaper than the standing desks, but still it takes some money. But on the right is one of your very own, Dr. Norma Figueroa from the School of Architecture, and she found a way to make her desk standing. It's like a wooden box, and she would put her computer on it and go, like she would be standing for a certain time and then sitting for a certain time, so it is possible. And in our lab, what we do, we just stack books on each other, and that's how we make our standing desks. If people don't like standing, or if they have chronic conditions, they can stand, which is understandable too. So what can we do in that case? There are certain types we can do, like stretching at the desk. There are like desk yogas. There are multiple videos that show that it can help us too. We have many meetings throughout the day. What if we, instead of sitting meetings, we decided to go on a walking meeting? And these are two of my colleagues, Bev and Emma, in action during their walking meeting. We have amazing space that can enable us to do the walking meetings without interrupting anyone. But here, space at the University of Texas Arlington, even if outside is like weather not permitting, there are like big hallways that something like that is possible. So grab your colleague, do a walking meeting, and if you have multiple meetings throughout the day, you can take one meeting to be a walking meeting and some others alternate, like sitting meeting. There's also, we can use the exercise ball as a chair. And on this photo, my colleagues, Monica and Darlene, have their own chairs, and you can even pick a color to brighten your office a little bit. So it is definitely helping not to slouch while we are seated in our chairs. But many people don't like exercise balls. They say like, oh, then I can't concentrate on my work. I'm just thinking not to fall off that thing. You can maybe alternate, or you can put the pop-up messages on your computer that would remind you to stand up every hour and just leave and walk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or just go to the washroom, just drink some water. So there are different possibilities if you don't like the balls. But what is really fantastic is that in Link Research Lab, there are standing desks, and it is a fascinating way the lab was presented, because it really brings people together. And even for visitors, there is like a desk that is really, really high, really tall, so people can stand, or there are high chairs that they can sit if they want to sit. They also have those, not necessarily balls, but it is kind of wobbly chair that does the same, so I was very happy to use all of that. So regardless of the fact that Arlington is a car-dependent city, these changes that are made either in a work environment or an outside environment are fascinating, and they have many, many facilities that will stimulate physical activity. For example, this is an activity center in Arlington. It is absolutely fascinating facility. I used it. It is fantastic. And usually people say, you know, like only slim people that are very fit go to the gym, which is really not true. I tried not to, like I did from a side note, that students cannot be recognized. But if you go there and see, there are people of many shapes and sizes and various level of fitness. So according to your level of fitness, you can make, you can go there and use certain equipment. Then there are beautiful, beautiful things that are in like little parks. There are little parks and little green areas, actually a lot of it with the furniture that stimulates the social interactions, which I really liked. It was fascinating to me that there was a lot of bikes and a lot of students that are cycling around the campus. Also, I saw many who would be driving from building to building, but it is fascinating how many cyclists are on the campus. Really, really nice. And if you can see, I'm not sure if you can see this, on my way to work, all these bike racks would be full. And people would be stacking bikes next to electricity poles or wherever available. So, which means like people want to cycle around the campus, so let's support them. And even more amazing was that I heard that from a couple of years ago, that University of Texas Arlington became a tobacco-free campus. That is absolutely amazing. But once upon a time, I can say like who knows how many years ago, that was someone's dream. Someone's dream was for University of Texas Arlington to become a tobacco-free campus. And you know, that dream came true. And amazing. It's fantastic for our students, for our children, and for ourselves. But can we dream, can we continue dreaming big? And can we dream even bigger? What if we decide that University of Texas Arlington becomes a car-free campus? So we have it tobacco-free, and what if we decide to become a car-free? What if we, instead of these huge parking lots, we have bike cages, like bike lots, that students can park their bikes safely? What if instead of all those parking lots, we have now beautiful parks and like fantastic area for social interactions among students, plazas, the one that is in Fort Worth, I like that, with a beautiful mural. What if we have that on campus? That's possible. What if the huge road that goes right in the middle of campus that we have to kind of go back and forth and with the overpass to cross it, what if that one becomes like a pedestrian street and a cycling street with wide sidewalks? So, or while we wait for that dream to come true, what if we, instead of paying for parking, we have special machines that would be like steppers, where if you want to park for an hour, you have to do a certain number of steps, and that machine will issue a ticket, for example, something like that. So I think we should dream big, and I think we should dream bigger to make our places healthier, and we definitely should think unconventional, and we should think outside of the box. And yeah, we should definitely be a maverick. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than willing to answer.
Well, thanks very much, Daniela. That was a great overview of the potential. I particularly like the way you finished it off with, at one point, and I still remember myself, I used to smoke, so I could walk through a mall, in a public mall, have a cigarette, and everybody else was doing it. But somewhere, someone came along and said, this isn't quite working. And it takes a series of cultural mindset shifts as well as a legal supporting structure to actually make those changes. So a great way to hit home on that point. Are there any questions related to this? As you're going through this, I did find when I arrived here that if you don't have a car in Arlington, you are not going far. So, but what were your reactions or any thoughts on Daniella's talk?
Or if you can share some good practices with your universities.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just very interested in the walkability score. I was very disappointed with my own city. How do you influence, like when in your study, did you do anything on the councils or those who actually have the funds to control the infrastructure that could actually develop the walkways and things to start to promote?
No, not necessarily. So research will focus just to think about the association, to explore the association between walkability and between physical activity. But it's certainly some. It is certainly some data that is aimed for policymakers and for higher levels that could change. But another thing is that this is really, with this type of walkability score, it's more like a fun data than it is more robust data. We do have more robust data on Walkability Index developed by Dr. Larry Frank and colleagues, so that would be much more robust data, but we didn't use such data.
There's a really great park in Dallas called Clybourne Park. Have anyone been there?
Yes.
It's really amazing. And actually uptown, just adjacent, is I think the most walkable area. Uptown Dallas is the most walkable area. It's really nearby. But it's a public-private. It was public-privately funded. So Ross Perot and some people like that, and then some public money, I think. So I think it was really complex how it was funded. Right over a freeway.
It was actually a really beautiful place. We went the other day, and I wanted to show the photo. And then, like, my question was, like, in the middle of the park, there is the road. So what if we close that road and make the bigger park, and then all the roads around it? Because still more space for improvement, I guess. But it's such a gorgeous park with beautiful chairs and waterfalls and beautiful places for kids to play. Really, really wonderful and walkable. You're right.
You don't have anything like that here.
So let's change the University of Texas Arlington to have a new Clybourne Park somewhere in the middle of the parking.
At the University of Western Australia, College of Business. When I visited, I thought it was an underground parking lot. I see students walking out, and there's a row of lockers. It's an underground bicycle parking lot. And it's just full of bicycles.
And very safer, much safer than just leaving them on the street.
It's a direct route to the classes, and then the way it was designed, you just thought it was for cars, but it's not. It's just cages of bikes.
I heard also at University of Sydney what they did. They have staircase that is similar, like in School of Architecture here, that it's like in the middle. It is bright and people can hang out. But what they did also, they built washrooms that are so far from the offices that you have to actually walk for several minutes until you reach the washroom, which is an amazing idea. That way, like, you have to go to the washroom, maybe you don't have to go outside. It is an amazing idea.
This is the latest building that they inaugurated like a few months ago. It is related to the health department. And yeah, they talk about how architectures thought about that, and then also the type of area you put in the middle of the building, such that everybody has to go to the bottom to the other side, right? That area is precisely also designed so that people talk to each other. So you have to go always to that area. You probably will likely find somebody else that is being there. So it's not only to foster exercise, but also interaction among people. And it was conceived like that, and there is a lot of light inside that comes from the ceiling. So it's very inviting to that type of activity. So yeah, we're seeing a change. But on the other hand, just to compensate, I ride my bike every day. I have a shower in the 9th floor, but only a staff can get there for health and safety reasons. And we've been trying to change that, and it's been an uphill battle for years. So students that cannot do that, I can do it, but they cannot. So yeah, there's still always a long way to go.
But fantastic examples of the changes made within the building.
I would say that, as far as
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they really did a nice job.
Have you tried parking in a garage that is a little bit like 5 or 10 minutes from the building you work at, or you're always?
Well, there's only really one parking garage, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
as far away as possible. But I don't drive to the top floor. I want to
Okay.
do that. However, I did walk up to the 6th floor here. So.
Fantastic.
UTA didn't used to be a bike college.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that many bike racks. I take care of the College of Business building. One of the things I find nowadays is that they even bring the bike to the classroom because they couldn't find a place to safeguard their own bike.
Yes.
Now there are also more and more bike lanes that are being put on the streets around campus. So in essence, I think this is not just us providing it, the students are demanding it. So,
True.
and they won't come to school. We've been told, you're not going green, so the students might not come. So it's not a choice that we can ignore.
Absolutely, I agree. And in the photo I took, we can see that all bike racks are full, and there are many more bikes that are, like at the end of the day, you just want to provide them more because capacity is reached already, and you want to stimulate that activity also because that's better than them driving from building to building. Yeah, and it helps the pollution level too.
So I'm wondering, Daniela, one of the issues around walkability is obviously it's culture and mindset. You listed some great example, stairs being better lit, hiding the elevators, maybe graffiti in the elevators. But
Making it a scary place. Although we shouldn't be doing that because there are still many people who, like if you're with a stroller and a walker and a wheelchair, you don't want to be spooked in the elevator. But I was just saying, like, let's just make stairs as inviting as an elevator and nice.
So, and I think those are great examples of just practical daily things that people can do. One of the things that I found a little interesting when I got to Arlington was the prevalence of big box stores, meaning that where I live right now, if I want to go get groceries, I have to drive to get groceries unless I want to walk back 5 miles with whatever I purchase. So it's not easy because there's not smaller grocery stores nearby, it's big box stores.
Yeah.
There's actually a lovely park on, is it Green Oaks? What's the name of that? Yeah. Yeah, so out there, but then even again, to get there, you really have to drive to get there so you can walk.
That's
but
true.
at least, I mean, it's really quite a lovely park to walk around. So how do you start untangling this when you have social and technological and economic issues such as big box stores is a trend, certainly in the U.S. and in Canada as well, versus the smaller mom and pop grocery stores we used to have? I mean, there's some complex issues. There's just not enough to mandate to say, go for a walk. It's just
It is very hard. It is very hard, I mean, like to say, like, just go for a walk if you don't have infrastructure for it. But with regards to stores, like, how many stores will be and what kind of stores will be, it's really dictated by residential density too. So if you have, if you live in a city with high residential density, there will be like thousands of people in such a small area, so there will be a lot of shops, a lot of stores. But if you live here where everything is sprawled, so residential density is lower, so there is no like money worth for people to open a small grocery store. They're not going to get money for it. So, and it will be not very hard, but as I mentioned, we should dream big, certainly, because retrofitting is very expensive, but our health is more expensive, and health expenditures, like health costs, like disease-related costs and curing the disease are even more expensive. So I think it is worth retrofitting the environments to make our lives healthier and happier.
Now, have you seen communities that have done that well? Like, are there regions of the world that you look at and say, that's a community that understood health impact, retrofitted, did it well? Are there any models you could point to that said, this is a model for other communities to follow?
So there are already a bunch of cities who did a lot of work, but still like higher residential density ones. So, for example, Portland is one of the U.S. cities that is like bikeable, walkable, really beautiful on the West Coast. So that would be one of the coolest city kind of to live in. But still, there is a lot of work to be done, and in these cities that are very sprawled, there are a lot of work to be done. But I still think that we can have even a little hubs that will be more walkable for people, even if they have to drive to a certain hub. if they're more walkable. And I saw in Arlington also, like, usually those areas for shopping areas, they would be just like box here, box there. But now I saw that a few little parks are made with cute waterfalls. They put benches for people to hang around. So changes are made slowly. It's just that it takes time, it takes money, and yeah, it takes everything.
Doesn't it kind of need to be corporate driven so that the corporation builds its own little utopia? Like, here's the job, here's the residents, here's the stores. It's because it seems like right now, you know, we're 30 minutes, 45 minutes away from where we work.
Mm-hmm.
So we're a car-driven society. And so until we feel where we work and around where we live, it just seems like it's the cart before the, you know, it's not going to happen.
I understand also what you're saying, but as long as we are having houses that are spread and big lots, big land, instead of, for example, as I saw in that city where people live like kind of up, we're just increasing in space more and more. So we'll still have like work here, but sometimes they would say drive till you qualify, because housing is expensive, so you would drive more. It's like 5 minutes from work, 10 minutes from work, an hour from work. Oh, I can afford my house here. So there are many factors actually that play.
There was the Garden City movement that started as kind of utopian. I remember learning about that 20th century architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Singapore, most of the housing board, it's designed into the housing estate community center, where they pretty much provide most of the outdoor activity.
Yes.
Singapore, where land is premium, everything has to go up.
Exactly.
So that kind of a community space, either a community playground or garden for you know, outdoor leisure, they're all built in there.
Well, I guess the other thing there too, because this is, I mean, interesting to see if you've looked at cultural aspects to this, because the U.S. and Texas, there are certain narratives around these regions. So in New York a while ago, I think it was Bloomberg decided to reduce the size of like soft drinks that would be available, and suddenly this was a Tea Party rallying cry. Like, how dare you tell us not to drink 2 liters of Coke for breakfast? So I think those are the kinds of challenges that I don't know how you get at that. I mean, so cultural value. So Texas sort of has an autonomous free spirit kind of a mindset, which is I'll build out because I can. Have you looked at all the cultural variables that relate to population density, development, and architecture?
Not necessarily in my research, but what happens is that we came to this point over time because there was some pressure, either media or social pressure. We had different maybe culture, I don't know, many years ago, because soft drinks did not last like they last in I don't know how many years. So they didn't last like they weren't here hundreds or more years ago, or they maybe even were because it was 1910. But the same as we adopted it, I think we can make an effort to drop it too. And there is a lot of population health initiatives that are trying to decrease slowly, because if you say like from tomorrow you're not going to drink that or you're not going to eat salty food, it's not going to happen. But if you decrease gradually, and if you're drinking 2 liters and then you start liter and a half or liter 0.7 or something like that, or if you're decreasing salt little by little, then that taste that they have is not going to be impacted or affected as much. So changes will come, and they will come slowly, just on a slower pace, and I guess the culture will gradually change too. But it's a huge effort because all the advertisements and all the industries, they're paying billions of dollars to advertise the products, and we are having millions of dollars to fight them and to give different types of messages. So it's disproportionate, even financially.
Well, we're at the end of the hour here, so Danielle, again, thanks for a very informative and enlightening talk.